Nerds versus geeks. That's the subject of today's Idea of the Day. Hi, I'm Joe, and I'm a geek. I'm not a nerd. Although some people might think I'm a nerd, I'm a geek. Now, some people don't know the difference. They say, well, that guy's a nerd. This guy's a geek. And I kind of first started to think about this just recently, where I go to an office every day where there are two different sides of the building, right? On one side of the building are the technicians who work on building networks, installing and setting up and supporting computers and whatnot. And then there's the team that I lead, which are the programmers. And what I get a kick out of is every now and then someone from the technician side will come over and they'll say, oh, look, nerds. And of course, I get a kick out of that because there's a perception on the programmers, the creative side, that the other side is a bunch of nerds. But there's a difference. And it's not something you can kind of get. Because the funny part about it is the guy that says that is a geek. And he's calling us nerds. And us nerds are calling them geeks, or vice versa. Let me set the matter straight so everyone understands the difference. I'm a geek. Nerds are kind of like geeks, except there's a small little difference. Nerds, and by the way, nerds started out as a Dr. Seuss term. I think just because it rhymed with some other word, so they just used it in a piece in the 1950s. Geeks started off in carnivals. They were like just out there, biting heads off of chickens and bats or whatever the heck it is, just kind of get attention. So the fundamental difference actually though in these days between a nerd and a geek is nerds tend to be, well, think of it this way, a nerd is like a 4-letter word for a 6-figure income most of the time. They're very quiet and introverted, and although I can be quiet at times, a lot of my people would say, given the room full of nerds and geeks, I tend to be the loudest. At least in my circles I am. I'm a bit out there. So the fundamental difference between a nerd and a geek is nerds are very quiet and introverted and kind of socially introverted. Nerds won't interact well with non-nerds. I must admit, nerds hanging out with nerds, pretty good combination. You put a nerd in a room with another nerd, and where they normally wouldn't even say 2 words to other people, they'll sit there forever and they'll talk about quantum physics. They'll talk about weird stuff that just involves a lot of math or science or stuff like that. But geeks, there are camping geeks. There are LARP geeks. These are guys that wear costumes and go to the medieval festival dressed as an elf or something like that. Geeks are very social, especially around other geeks, but that doesn't matter to a geek. A geek will not think twice. Again, that's because they started as carnies that'll bite the heads off of chickens for attention. They will do almost anything to interact with people. They love using jargon. They love talking tech and science, but they also just love things like games. Some of them, I don't play games, but some of them they're like gaming geeks. There are restaurant geeks that just love talking about food and all the little nuances about, oh, they use caramelized onions on that one, and that's a food geek. Now, geeks, by the way, as long as we're in this territory, are not hipsters. You see, I'll give you a little difference. Hipsters see these weird trends and the way like they may grow their beards thick, and they might decide to create YouTube. That's a hipster. All right. Well, some hipsters are geeks. Let's just leave it at that. But a hipster they're like posers in a way, right? They're a little bit like a poser. It's like, oh, beards are popular right now, so all right, I don't want to go there. A hipster is like a geek without the science. Let's just say that. geek without the science. They'll go to the Knicks game and try to get great seats, and they'll maybe pay $1,000. That's a hipster. Pay $1,000 for the seat, and then after the game's over or before the game's over, they know nothing about the team. They know nothing about the sport. They don't follow it. They don't know who's number one in the playoffs. You get what I'm saying? That's a hipster. A geek, on the other hand, a sports geek, forget about it. You ask a sports geek who had a perfect game in the 1961 World Series or whatever it is, and they'll just, bam, that's a sports geek. Geeks are social, quirky, and they sometimes resemble hipsters, but they're not quiet. That's a nerd. So there's the difference. Are you a nerd or a geek? Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And that's today's Idea of the Day. All right, there it is. That's today's Idea of the Day. Some of them are pretty good, right? And some of them suck, I admit. First to admit, some of my ideas suck. But if you visit Idea of the Day every day and you subscribe to my channel by looking at the subscribe link in the corner, you'll see a brand new idea every single day. And I promise you, some of them don't suck.